Hello, hello. Hello. So we're in day 1 of Dream, and I'll give a couple minutes for people to jump on, and then if you're watching the replay, just be a couple minutes before I really get started. But we're going to talk about rewriting your history today. So earlier today in our audio, we talked about reframing failure. So my idea is that this live stream will tag on to what we did this morning. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, that's okay. But it'll tag along to what we did this morning. So my idea for all of the trainings are that you'll have a morning audio that you can listen to and start to journal, and then kind of be within the theme during the day, and then you can chase it with these afternoon audios, so that by the end of the day you have kind of like a whole experience of being at like a workshop training. So that's kind of my idea on how I structured the day. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on rewriting your history. And then I did promise to share my story a bit too. So I have a couple questions for you to journal with. So if you have your journal, you can get your journal. And then I'll kind of go into some of my own failures and how I've rewritten those failures into opportunities. Okay, so to get started. And I put a PDF outline in our group today. And so if you're looking for it, it's going to be in units, and it's going to be under day 1. And if you can't find it, just let me know, and it'll be there throughout the course. So, rewriting your history. And our theme is setting her free from guilt and shame. And so that'll be our theme. So setting her free begins with forgiveness. You must forgive yourself for these failures that you've written down. Once you can sit with your failures and reframe what they mean to you, your history begins to change. Soon a life filled with tragedy turns into a life filled with promise. So this is where I want to ask you a couple questions that you can journal. So leading off of our work this morning, what does your history look like now that you've discovered that each failure is an opportunity for you? So what does your history look like now that you've discovered each failure is an opportunity for you? And I'll give you time to write that down. And if you're on the replay, you can pause. And then moving on to our next question. What beautiful things would be missing from you in your life if you hadn't had those failures? So what beautiful things would be missing from you or from your life if you hadn't had those failures that we listed out this morning? Okay, and I'll pause, give you some time, and then if you're on the replay, you can pause it. And again, the questions are in your PDF, so you'll have those. So now I wanted to share a little bit more about my story and how I've rewritten it. And some of the things that I listed this morning in our audio. And so a lot of people don't know a whole lot about details about my history, and I'm going to kind of do this with as much grace as I can do it, just to try to keep this about you, essentially. But while at the same time just letting you know a little bit about where I am. Because a lot of times what I think happens is that people see what I want them to see. Because I work very hard at being professional and being a coach and being someone that people think that they can connect with, but then also feel like they can learn from. So some of this stuff will be new. So I'll share with you now, I've rewritten my story after these failures in particular. So domestic violence, job loss, divorce, relationship turnover, financial hardship, physical injury from overload, and what I titled Single Mom Shortcomings. So, I don't really have a script. I thought I would just kind of go from what I'm feeling on my heart to share about each of those situations. But the first topic is kind of the most loaded one, is the domestic violence. So some of these might not seem like a failure, but like for me and what I talk with Barbara, my therapist, about is that it sort of feels like some of these situations have left their mark, and that maybe society feels like maybe it's a failure. So I think that sometimes we take on things as failures that really aren't failures. They're part of life, and then they're part of our learning, and they're part of our journey. So as I say these, if you wouldn't quite register these as a failure, that totally makes sense, because some of these maybe shouldn't be. So as far as like domestic violence goes, my earliest memories of domestic violence are from before the age of 5. So within my home, there was periods of time where there was definite physical violence, and then there was definite psychological and verbal abuse going on, depending on the father that I had in the house. So another topic kind of is relationship turnover. And one thing that kind of ties in with me is that I've had five dads, I say. And the last couple I didn't know very well, but all in all, for me, the journey with rebounding or learning about men and relationships in general has been kind of like this major theme that I still feel like I'm navigating, and that I still feel like I don't quite have a full grasp on. But there was domestic violence going on in my house before the age of 5. So as early as even just me being born and in the world, there was stuff going on. So I go see Barbara for PTSD, because there are some things that happened that impacted me in a permanent way. So this stuff is like really close to my heart. And then also my first marriage ended with an ex parte and like an order of protection. And it meant that I like left the home abruptly and left my things, and had to get like a court order to come back and get my things at a safer time. So for a long time, and even just as early as a couple years ago, that history of domestic violence, that history of fear, made me feel like maybe I was a certain type of person, or like I was over here, and that people that hadn't experienced that were somehow over here. So that is one of the first ones. The next big one is divorce. So I've been divorced twice now. So the first one ended with an ex parte and all of that mess. And then the second one ended when my son Jacob was just 7 months old. So his father didn't want to be married anymore. And there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into that too. And that might be like a later course. But to be stamped twice with the divorce stamp was also something I took on. So I took on domestic violence survivor, divorcee, and then with that, financial hardship and job loss. So right after my first divorce, I ended up losing my full-time job. And then that kind of spiraled me. And then right after Jacob's father left our marriage, that spun me to be able to take that on as like the sole provider for Jacob. So we've got domestic violence, we've got divorce, we've got job loss, we've got financial hardship. And then relationship turnover was one of the things on the list. And I'm still navigating it. So this is something that I still have to reframe and rewrite in my history. So I can remember having tumultuous relationships, like even back in high school. So, and I remember at a very young age, like each time a relationship didn't work out, I kind of like wore that as like a sign of like I didn't have it figured out. Okay. And then single mom shortcomings. I think we could add like a million things to this list, but there is constant things like when I'm at any kind of school functions, or when I don't get to do this or that for Jacob, or I don't get to sign him up for enough things, or like right now, like all the kids, like a lot of the kids are getting picked up from school, and I see all the cars and the parents are picking them up. And so sometimes even like me working like these extra hours, which aren't even that much because it's only 4:15. A lot of parents don't pick up their kids early, but it feels sometimes like a failure for me to even be a single mom in the first place, and for me to have had Jacob under those circumstances. Okay, so we're stacking the cards on the failure side for Maile. So we've got domestic violence, divorces, relationship turnover, losing jobs, financial hardship, single mom, mess. And then we've got physical injury from overload. So 2 years ago, I hurt my back after I had gone through like this whole huge, big new thing. I had went on this huge undertaking of becoming a Olympic lifter. But then I decided not only to just do that, but to add in tire flipping and all sorts of other things. And I didn't take into account carrying Jacob upstairs or spotting a client that's like a wheelchair-based client. So after all of that, after all those other failures, after I like decided I was gonna go and conquer, then I got landed with a back injury. So that's a lot, and I could live there, and I did. I have lived there, and sometimes I still live there. And so like what I wanted to share with you is that kind of the whole reason that I'm here is that I've decided that those failures, like each one of those, like is an opportunity for me to grow stronger. So like I've come out the other side now after a couple years of restoration, which is like the whole idea behind everything. I've come out now on the other side like truly, and I didn't know for sure if it would happen, but truly okay with how things have gone down. It's raining. I'm going to close my laptop. So I'm going to see if there is an alternative plan. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to pack up my laptop, and then I'm going to go to the car. So this live stream will be 2 parts, okay?